Nothing exempt.
Wait, Nick. Okay, now we're broadcasting. Welcome to Nothing Exempt, everybody. The show that is just Nick and I spitballing with each other about things we want to talk about. Okay, Nick, I think that this is a great time to reveal the most amazing subject for a podcast ever and timely. What do you want to tell our audience who are
Oh,
or must be on the edge of their seats? What will this be about? Assuming they haven't read the title.
oh, it's our favorite senator, of course, or at least former favorite senator, John Sidney McCain III.
Yes. And what about Sydney makes for a good podcast?
Well, I have really not much, even though I don't like saying ill of the dead, I don't really have much positive to say about him.
Yeah, I have to say that it's very it's poor taste to have a party for the dead, and I would never do it for even almost any political enemy, but for John McCain, I'm thinking hooray, you know?
Well, I mean, I just wanted him to retire out in peace, but he was too
Oh,
stuck
he
that.
should have stepped down. He hasn't been able to be a part of the Senate for a whole year. He's only made occasional votes for the past year, and he should have stepped down when he got his diagnosis to deal with it and let somebody else go to work. There was no reason to do what he did.
Well, there was a reason for him to do it. He wanted to block the repeal of Obamacare.
Yeah, it was spite. It was old man spite. That
Yeah,
was his number one reason for continuing in the Senate.
yeah, he really just was mad at Donald Trump and wanted to get back at him, and so that's what he did.
And he did. He got back at him. He voted no on Obamacare repeal, and he was the deciding factor in stopping it. And the one of the major campaign promises couldn't come through for at least so far in history because of John McCain.
Well, I mean, if this was the only thing that we had an issue with John McCain, he would not be getting a podcast. So, Brian, let's get started with your thoughts on John McCain, the man, his policies, his actions in the Senate, and his campaign for president.
Okay,
Uh,
well, let me take a minute and say that there's quite a few of you listeners out there, and we really appreciate you guys. I started a Twitch channel that I'm putting these videos on just because if you have an Amazon Prime account and otherwise don't use Twitch, you can subscribe to us through Amazon Prime, and it'll give us $5 a month, and you otherwise cost you nothing. So if that's an avenue that you would like to use to support us for free, something you're already doing, you're not supporting somebody else on Twitch already, but you do have an Amazon Prime account, just subscribe to us and you're giving us $5. And that's pretty cool. But the other sponsor is the Cause and Effect Report. Go to causeandeffectreport.com to learn more. So let's talk about Johnny, the man who never met a war he didn't like, who
yeah,
never saw a rebel group on the other side of the world that he didn't want to arm.
yeah. I
And the
remember
man.
Vox Media did a piece basically rating every country by how many angry John McCain heads out of 1 to 5 scale, and based on how many times he's threatened to bomb or take military action against the country. And pretty much every country in the world had at least one hot John McCain head, even Canada.
And what's the point of bombing somebody to bring them peace and democracy? Don't you have to ruin everybody's life to give them something that's better than what they have? Maybe not successfully. Like your track record wasn't great on doing that with anybody you tried to do that with. But even if you succeeded, like you have to put them through a lot of hell to get to a little bit of democracy.
Oh yeah, he bought into the neocon ideology that basically the American power is at its peak, and we need to use our military force to make as much of the world American democracy like as possible before our power waned. And I think that's the neocon ideology in about one sentence, and it's flawed.
Yeah, here's a quote from John McCain from 2000. I would arm, train, equip both from within and from without forces that would eventually overthrow governments and install free, democratically elected governments. That was his policy, in a nutshell,
Yeah,
from his own mouth.
Yeah, like there's not. That's effectively one of the reasons why I am such a strong critic of John McCain. He basically always wants to go to war. His solution to every foreign policy problem is bomb and overthrow the regime.
Yeah, like to be honest, I'd rather live under Saddam Hussein than the current government and the current situation in Iraq.
Yeah, I mean, maybe ideally, if this transition to the current situation without our doing, I would maybe better. But the fact that the cost and money and blood of both the U.S. soldiers and Iraqi civilians, it wasn't worth it.
No, of course it wasn't worth it. This is one of those things where there's a pet project, and it also happens to align with missile and military sales to big donors. That it just is great for everybody. You get to say that America's great and that you're helping democracy, and you get to fund your donors.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't really know the history of McCain's donors, but I bet it's heavily defense industry.
So so there's a foundation. Like every big politician has a foundation. Like who doesn't? McCain's got a foundation. You know who's one of the biggest donors to their foundation? The nation state of Saudi Arabia to the McCain Foundation. I don't remember if it was a million. I don't remember if it was a billion.
Has
I
John
know that
McCain ever suggested bombing them?
no, Saudi Arabia is one of those peace-loving, democratically elected countries that you would never want. Oh wait, no, it's not.
Listen to our show on Saudi Arabia for that one.
Yeah, listen to our show in Saudi Arabia. Um, I mean, come on. He picked and chose his way through life, and at the same time, uh, he he loved bombing places, and he got to give money to Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and a million other defense companies. It's not just those. I, I love all those companies. I love making things and only get used once. It's a fantastic business model. They have to buy another one as soon as you use it. But as far as the need to blow up a dirt hut on the other side of the world, very few people could see the benefit in that better than John McCain.
Well, I can understand maybe if you think that policy, like the first time he suggested it, maybe like in the 90s in Somalia or Panama in 8, he was for bombing Panama in 89. I think that was like one of the first major times McCain came out in favor of bombing a country, but I may be wrong on that.
Well, I looked up the countries that he was against occupying, bombing. He was in favor of withdrawing troops from. Here's the list: Lebanon in 1982, Somalia in 1993, and Haiti in 1994. There you go. There's everybody.
Hmm.
So, as far as 1994 being the most recent year, that is a long time ago.
That's 3 more than I thought.
That's 3 more than anybody knew. It's been a while. He obviously had some changes of heart in the last
But I mean,
25
after
years.
what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Libya and Yemen and a variety of other places, wouldn't he learn that this doesn't work?
I don't know. There's a picture of him from like 2 years ago with a bunch of ISIS guys. Do you remember that being in the
Oh yeah.
news? Yeah, where he accidentally was in a picture with some people from ISIS. He went over to Syria to meet with different groups.
Well, yeah. As long as they buy bombs, he's happy.
What'd be great is if both sides buy bombs and they bomb each other.
Yeah. So outside of John McCain's foreign policy, what are some other criticisms you have for him as a senator?
He is one of those Republicans, which there's still many left in the Senate, and I despise the people who say to all of their electorate, we have a problem with pork barrel spending. We have a problem with giving too much money away and going into debt. And I'm a fiscal hawk. And then they get to DC and they never do a single thing about that. They'll criticize it on the campaign trail, And then as soon as they get the chance to spend the money, everybody gets their money.
Well, yeah, I remember John McCain actually ran on in 2000 and in like to a lesser extent 2008 on the idea that he was the anti-pork candidate, and he had this website where it currently monitored all the most ridiculous pork spending across the country. But it doesn't say that he was behind a lot of it too, particularly in defense.
Here's a quote. I'm looking at a list of quotes from McCain, and this goes right in line with just, he was a politician. He was a fantastic politician for just saying things that the electorate would agree with. He didn't do anything about anything, really, that the electorate wanted. He didn't act on anything that he was saying that he was going to act on. But here's something. I looked into Putin's eyes and I saw three letters, a K, a G, and a B. Like, what the heck? This guy, he was a real life cartoon character. He was our senator from Arizona, and he
Yeah,
was
but
unbeatable.
that's not all he did though.
He's
Like,
he's unbeatable. He was the Maverick, Nick.
yeah, he was the maverick because he voted with the Democrats too many times. And if you notice, like the history of like they're the surveys that measure like the how your conservative voting percentage and your liberal voting percentage, basically like he voted with the party whenever he was at risk of being primaried or when it was close to him running for president. But then when after his a political opponent wins the Republican primary for president, whether it's Bush in 2000 or Trump in 2016, he goes full maverick.
Well, a lot of that was he's part of the state of Arizona, where it is a kind of purple state. He did go
Arizona's
with.
been until recently a very solid red state.
It's been a very solid red state, and he's voted in line with the people of Arizona a lot. I feel like he went issue by issue in line with this people of Arizona, but then on like the fringes went out against everybody just to spite Trump, just to spite, you know,
He spited GW a lot more than he did Trump.
yeah, just like George W. Bush. He was upset that he never got to be president. I feel like that haunted him all the way to his grave. He really wanted to be president. He felt like he lost his chance in 2004, and then he was this sacrificial cow in 2008 against Obama, where
It was
he had no
2000
chance.
where he really had the shot being president. 04 was Bush's second term.
Oh, sorry, 2000. When I was remembering the primary against George W. Bush, where he felt like it was his turn, and then he didn't get it. He definitely didn't appreciate that.
I mean, I'm just was amazed how he even won the nomination in 2008. If you were going a sacrificial lamb, why didn't you sacrifice somebody of principle, say like a Ron Paul or something like that? At least you would have.
No, the way it works in the Republican Party is you give the guy his turn.
Yeah, it's really dumb. That's why you get bad candidates when you do that.
That's why we ended up with Romney and McCain and
Bob Dole,
Bob Dole. Bob Dole is the ultimate example of this policy.
George W. Bush, George Bush.
Yeah, it's your turn to lose, Bob. You get to be the nominee. Whoever we put up is going to lose. So just
Yeah.
go for it.
And how the Democrats screwed up in 2016 is that they decided to go with the Republican "it's your turn" style primary for Hillary Clinton, and look what happened to them.
No, it's obviously something that happens on both sides of the aisle. You shouldn't say that it's just
I think,
going to be your turn and you'll get to be president. They should never just throw away their chances.
well, I
Like,
think
I
it's
feel
more of a GOP thing, though.
it is much more of a GOP thing, but like Hillary Clinton was an ultimate example of that. It was her turn, had nothing to do with the fact that she was a bad candidate. If they had run a good candidate, they could have won, but it was her turn. And there's been other people on the left that have had that exact same thing. And that was ultimately why John McCain was picked in 2008. It was his turn, and it was his turn to lose. And it didn't matter who ran; he was going to lose. Who that person was going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, Bush kind of was having things run into the ground. I mean, it looked like in his campaign. Do you think he was really trying to win in 08? Because I remember he suspended his campaign in the middle of it to vote for TARP. Another maverick move, which I clearly don't back.
His pick in vice president was obviously a Hail Mary. You don't pick the governor of Alaska, who is a ridiculous personality all in herself, unless it's obvious that you're losing and you're reaching really far to try to win something.
Yeah, but after the Sarah Palin thing turned out to be a bust, it just seemed like the campaign was like limping along.
No, it was obviously lost. Like he threw the Hail Mary in August during the convention, and then after that, it was obvious he was never going to win. He was behind 20 points in the polls, no matter what poll you looked at. He wasn't going to win that election.
Well, he
And
only ended up finishing down like 9 points, I think. This is a lot for a presidential election.
in the Electoral College, it was a landslide.
Yeah.
That's how presidential elections work. Is the Electoral College a 51-49 across the important states leads to hundreds of points in difference. So I feel like he was burned from that experience, and then seeing Trump win when he couldn't do the same thing really made him angry. I feel like he resented Trump's success.
Well, he definitely did. And he's part of this cabal, like, for lack of a better term, like with the Bush family and the Clintons, just this old money, old politics families that think that since it's their turn and they've taken the bribes and done what they need to do, that they should be the ones running the world. And if you disagree with them, that you don't have a place in power.
Well, it is. He was part of the cabal where he did get the place in power. He was in charge of very important committees. He did make decisions on things like the F-35 and the biggest contracts that have ever been awarded to a private contractor. You know, he was in a position of power for at least the last 20 years, a place of making big decisions every time his party was in power. So, if can you imagine being the leader of XYZ committee in the Senate and having the power to have people fired or give people the biggest pay raises and profits they've ever had, having that at the control of your fingertips on every at least a couple votes? Like it's got to be a real high, but at the same time, the real power he never was able to achieve. So it must have been a mix of he's got a lot of power, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think about the accusations of McCain marrying into money and moving to Arizona just for his political career? Because he moved to Arizona in 1981 and ran for office in 82, the congressman.
Of course, it was for his. He was a carpetbagger. I don't see anything wrong with people necessarily being a carpetbagger inside the United States. Like, if you live in Portland and you're conservative, you got to move if you want to do politics. It's just a matter of fact. And I don't actually resent him at all for anything like that. I do think that the fact that he left his first wife, who happened to also be handicapped when he came back from Vietnam, was a real mark against his record. The fact that he was willing to give up on his vows for the sake of personal ambition, it shows a lot about his character. And to speak ill of the dead, I'd say that anybody who does that, alive or dead, is a little bit despicable.
So, did you watch any of the funeral last week?
Heck no. I knew that was going to be a Trump bashing event. That would have nothing to do with John McCain. He's one of the few people in my entire lifetime that have ever been held at state. And what did he do to deserve being held at state? He's not a dead king. I'm not a part of the UK. I don't care that he died. And I don't care to have his, flag drenched coffin in the middle of the rotunda in the Senate building or Congress building, whatever you call that building. But
Well, the National Cathedral.
He's in the National Cathedral. Huh.
Yeah.
Anyways, he didn't deserve it. Put him in the ground. Maybe put him 12 feet deep because deep down he's a really good person. He doesn't deserve just the normal 6. But it doesn't matter. He's not around to enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw parts of it because my I was on vacation and my relatives wanted to watch it, and I'm just under. First of all, why would people want to watch the funeral of a senator? Like, do you think that they'll put Dianne Feinstein's funeral on
I
TV?
I hope that it doesn't happen, but ultimately I don't care since I don't watch TV. It'll just be other people in retirement homes who are watching that funeral if it ever happens.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
and part of the reason why there was this circus around him is because he was the opposition to an existing president, like the current modern day president. So if Nancy Pelosi or name your Democrat senator or congresswoman or man was really against a Democrat president and all the media was very Republican, of course it'd be the same thing. But we don't have a Republican president. We don't have a conservative media. So none of that's going to happen. Of course, it's not going to happen.
well, it's funny is that all these people who bashed McCain during his campaign for president and during his time as senator until very recently had all the most glowing words to say about him, like
Of course,
Obama,
they did.
Schumer, Pelosi. It's just funny. It's like they flip on a dime.
Well, it's kind of I know you told me that you haven't read the book 1984, Nick, but like the rewriting of history that happens in that book, it's so similar. He's dead. Everybody, take out your notebooks, throw away the bad stuff, and rewrite all the good things that we're going to say about him now because he's dead. Rewrite history. It's exactly what's happening in the media. They're just like, let's only throw accolades on the man. Let's forget about all the bad things we said about him 6, 9, 12 months ago. It's not even that old. Like the stories that we said that we complained about the way that John McCain was voting or whatever he said. Everybody's still alive. Everybody still remembers it, but we're just going to act like it never happened.
Yeah, because he voted pretty well in line with the Republicans between 2009 and 2015, and a lot of people complained about him for that. But now those same people love him.
Of course they do. It's just a matter of like he died. If he had lived for another 10 years and just retired, none of this would have been around. None of this would have happened.
Well, it's similar to what's happening right now with George W. Bush. His reputation, at least among the media and historians, is getting a little bit of a boost because he's been publicly against Trump.
Exactly. My enemies of my friend. They're having the same reaction to him that they're having to John McCain. They're like, "Oh, he's anti-Trump. I'm anti-Trump. I might as well be on his side."
Yeah, and
Even
it's
though
funny.
they spent 8 years on the opposite side of the aisle opposing everything he said,
Yeah, not
calling
just
him a
that, they
buffoon.
spent the first like 5 years or plus of Obama's presidency blaming everything on Bush too.
Yeah, it's just a rinse and repeat. I feel like we're gonna see the same thing again. Nick, I think this is. I actually haven't looked at the time. There's no recording on this Hangout, so if you're listening by a podcast, you can probably see the time, but I can't. So I feel like we're getting close to the end of this discussion, so that we can move on to something different on a different podcast another time. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's really all I have to say on this is that I think John McCain was one of my least favorite senators in the Republican Party, maybe in either party. These the Democrats are honest. Like John McCain is kind of the worst of both worlds. He agrees with all the Republicans on war policy, but on like fiscal issues and immigration, he sides with the Democrats.
I think the proof is in the pudding. And where I work, which everybody's told me where I work, they have no interest in listening to my podcast. So I want to say to you, Mark, if you're listening, you're the proof I'm talking about. This guy's the most liberal guy where I work, and he said a lot of nice things about John McCain. And that's exactly the point. He was a Democrat, and then made a lot of Democrats happy, but put an R in front of his name. So I'm personally just pretty happy that we're going to finally have a real Republican in the state of Arizona, or an honest Democrat, but at least it won't be a Republicrat or whatever John was. So
Well,
if
they did appoint John Kyle to replace him, who's like
or
76 years old and I was retired.
yeah, it's a short-term thing. I don't know if he's going to be the senator for a very long time, but
Well, he's gonna do the remaining 2 years before there's a special election.
yeah, exactly. So we will do another podcast in that time, I'm sure, to talk about that election. But if you think we're crazy or agree, we want to hear what you have to say, and you can comment on the YouTube video below. You can go to reddit.com, nothing exempt, the subreddit, and write a very long thing, and we will read it all and comment back and forth with you. Or if you feel like you're limited to like 200-ish characters, then tweet at us at nothing exempt. Is there anything else you want to add, Nick? Because I'm about ready to close.
No, I think we kind of covered all of it. Goodbye, John.
Yeah. Bye, John. This is the last podcast you're going to get from us. So if you're watching from another place, I'm not going to say it's heaven, but if you're watching it from another place, this is going to be the last one you're going to hear about
Only
you.
God could judge McCain's personal life.
Only God can judge anybody's salvation, and I don't pretend to know his inner workings of his soul. So God, if you're listening, I'm not judging him. But anyways, thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking with you, the listener.